Scientists all over the world will gather in the streets tomorrow for the March for Science. The idea started in the U.S., modeled on the Women's March that brought millions out after the inauguration of U.S. President Donald Trump. Scientists, including those in Canada, want their voices heard, and you can hear from some of them in Kelly Crow's in-depth analysis on cbcnews.ca. But the concern is particularly acute stateside, where many scientists feel they're increasingly under attack. Here's why.
So Obama's talking about all of this with the global warming and that. A lot of it's a hoax. It's a hoax.
We're going to cancel the Paris Climate Agreement.
As a candidate, Donald Trump was a climate change denier.
Love our coal mine.
Who was then elected president.
You know what it says, right? You're going back to work.
That changed the climate for scientists.
Imagine you spend your entire life trying to do one thing, and then someone comes along and says, everything you've done is a hoax, or a conspiracy, or is worthless. What do you do with that?
Some, like top U.S. climate scientist Benjamin Santer, openly revolted against Trump's position.
If the program is to advance ignorance, then I'm not with the program.
Government scientists began compiling their climate data in a public online archive in case it got lost. Within days of inauguration, Trump's White House issued a media blackout on some federal scientists.
The war on coal is done. It's over.
And his cabinet picks deepened the concern. Scott Pruitt, with deep ties to the fossil fuel industry, became head of the Environmental Protection Agency. He doesn't seem to believe that burning fossil fuels is driving climate change.
And there's tremendous disagreement about the degree of impact. So no, I would not agree that it's a primary contributor to the global warming that we see.
So help me God. So help me God.
Rex Tillerson is Secretary of State, former head of ExxonMobil. The White House proposes massive cuts to his State Department, totally eliminating aid for poor countries coping with climate change.
Regarding the question as to climate change, I think the president was fairly straightforward. That we're not spending money on that anymore. We consider that to be a waste of your money.
That was Mick Mulvaney, Trump's budget director. He presented a White House wish list that involves slashing vast sums of research funding from the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Energy, the EPA, even NASA.
Zero and liftoff of the Atlas V rocket.
Trump's vision is fossil-fueled.
It's going to be an incredible pipeline, greatest technology, known demand.
He's approved pipelines and pushed for an American future powered by coal.
And have clean coal, really clean coal.
He's lifted regulations on carbon emissions and killed Obama-era climate change rules, including those that deal with planning for extreme weather events. Now scientists are standing against that agenda.
This is science. It's not something to toy with. It's not something to say, I choose not to believe equals MC squared. You don't have that option.
They're donning lab coats, taking to the streets.
In the words of Albert Einstein, remember, a refugee to this country, those who have the privilege to know have the duty to act.
But when science gets political, does it gain or lose the power to persuade?
We did not start this fight.
Lucky Tran is a scientist and one of the organizers of the March for Science. He joins me tonight from Washington. Lucky, you know, science funding is perpetually under pressure. How different is the landscape in the U.S. now?
Well, I think science really has been under attack for a long time. I think we have to make that clear. Right now, the urgency of those attacks with, you know, the proposed cuts to the NIH budget, the defunding of the EPA, it feels all the more urgent right now.
But marches, they attract a lot of attention, a lot of heat. But what do you expect to get out of tomorrow's march?
So I think one of the things that has been really apparent with these attacks is that historically, we haven't really had the infrastructure to really stand up against attacks on science in this country. We've had professional organizations, but they've tended to be very conservative in their approach. They don't call out politicians, they don't march in the streets, they don't knock on every door. And what we really need now is an infrastructure to stand up, and well, that's what we're building with this march. We have marches in over 600 cities around the world. We have a grassroots network of activists who are ready to throw down for science.
But there's a debate, isn't there, about whether to politicize science? I mean, there's been reluctance to march in the streets, to make it political, because normally we see science as neutral, as objective. Is there a risk at making it more political?
So what I want to really say about that is people love having that debate, is science political or not? But I really think that's the wrong question we should be asking, really. What's happened is that science has always been political, and politicians have made science political. What we should be asking is, who does science serve? Whose interests does science serve? And really, when politicians attack science, when they deny science, science can only serve elite interests in that case. It can't serve all of us as it should. So that's why we need to stand up for science right now.
Is there a risk, though, that you will be seen as another special interest group and some people may discredit you as a result?
I don't think there's that risk. I think really this is too important. It affects everyone. You know, it's not just scientists caring about their funding or their careers. We do science because we care about improving society. I'm a scientist. I've done research on gene therapy, on cancer research, and on finding new antibiotics. We can't really do our work right now because we're under attack, and we really want to serve society. So I think there's a lot of broad-based support for science.
It seems so, particularly looking at the breadth of this march. I mean, clearly scientists in the U.S. feel under particular pressure, but if we look at a map of the world, there are over 600 marches planned for tomorrow. These people are not under the White House dominance or control, so what are they fighting for globally? Why has this taken off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have my roots in 5 different countries, and I've done science in 3 of those. And really, science is a global enterprise. The decisions that we make in the US or in Canada or in Australia, they have far-reaching consequences. To combat these large issues in society, like climate change, like genetics, like automation, they require all of us to stand up for science everywhere.
But the president, you know, he's been quite forceful on his views about climate change and some of the other things we've talked about. What likelihood is it that he would reverse his stand on some of those things?
So really what we have to do is we really have to advocate hard for this. To be honest, the scientific community is really frustrated at the moment. We're not seeing in the White House or in governance that open ear to science. But science has been a pillar of civilization for a long time. And so we are hopeful. We have to be out there and vocal. We can't stand on the sidelines and hope that that happens and hope that good scientific decisions happen. We have to be out there marching. We have to show up to our politicians and make that happen.
Do you think you've missed opportunities in the past to engage with the public, you know, stayed in your insular communities of scientists and not communicated effectively enough why funding is necessary and why it is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are terribly late on this, and we're late on this because scientists have been scared. They've been scared to look, as you say, like a special interest group. They're scared to look like they're biased, and they're scared to lose their funding. But that's really been a short-sighted approach, because we have to all come back to why we do science. It's for the common good. It's for the good of society. And by really standing on the sidelines, what happens is that you vacate that space for other people who have less of an expertise. And so politicians have been able to come in and really put forward their special interests, and that's at the cost of all of us. So scientists cannot no longer stand there. We have to be engaged.
Lucky Tran, it will be an interesting day tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.